Well, welcome everyone to the MPF webinar we have slated for February. Great program about ownership mindset within the law firm. And we've got Dr. Sharon Meit Abrahams with us. Hey, Sharon, how are you?
Hey, John. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you here. And David Lackowitz as well joining us. And our echo is there, David.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, John.
Thank you for being with us. We appreciate your participation and all the smart, insightful things you're going to say. Uri, good to see you as well. How's things since we last met?
Thanks, John. I am doing well, and I appreciate, although I'm a little disappointed you didn't say all the smart things I'm going to say, but that's okay.
Well, Uri, prove me wrong and say some smart things during the next hour or so. We'll begin at the top of the hour, and as this is our 45th program, it's hard to believe when that horrible pandemic hit. Thank you. We had nowhere to go. So Uri and I said, what are we going to do to entertain ourselves? And we started doing webinars, and people actually showed up. And so we've learned, usually trial and error, what people enjoy and how they find value. The banter, we're going to go fast. We are unrehearsed. And the data we produce through the registrant questions. When you signed up, we had you ask a few questions, and we're going to do some live polling questions as we go. And as those of you know who've been before, we're going to send you a link to an on-demand recording and some handout materials that will include the survey results, some good stuff to share with your colleagues, all are in part. So glad everyone is here. We had about 75 people register for this program, which a little bit below average. Maybe the holiday got in there for those of us in the U.S. Monday was a holiday that may have influenced things, but here we are, ready to roll. Uri, anything you want to say before we get started?
Ownership mindset, love it. This is a great topic, and a lot of people focusing on this these days because it's time people post-pandemic looking around at their team and saying, who do we got here? So it's a great topic, John. Glad we're doing it.
So am I. And David, Sharon, welcome. And here we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our 45th MPF webinar of our series, The Law Firm of the Future. Today, we're going to talk about creating an ownership mindset among the partners at your law firm. And we've invited Dr. Sharon Meit Abrahams to join us with David Lackowitz, who's a partner at Moses and Singer. We're getting that background in New York. So welcome, Sharon. Welcome, David. We are glad you are here.
Glad to be here, John.
All right, let's roll. Our few housekeeping announcements. Uri, how are you doing?
I am good, John. This is a great topic. Glad to be here. Thanks.
Excellent. Those of you know Uri works with Ames and Goff, a risk management firm specializing in smaller mid-sized law firms. I run our managing partner conference, and we'll talk a little bit about our upcoming show. Our guest speakers, Sharon Meit Abrahams, David Lackowitz, welcome to both of you. And that background keeps coming in on us, that background noise. Upcoming announcements, and then we'll get started. Our webinar series, we try to do these on the third Wednesday of the month, 2 o'clock Eastern. And we have our leadership conference coming up in a couple of months. Share with you a little bit about that. And if you're interested in coming, we encourage you to register early because we do sell out. This fall, we'll be doing a program specifically for women in law firm leadership. It will be in Chicago. We get out our newsletter on a weekly basis, got a lot of stuff over on our website. Shameless plug for our upcoming conference. So we're honing in on profitability. Our polling of leaders, mid-sized, smaller law firms suggests that profitability is emerging as our top issue. 2 years ago, it was all about culture. As we emerge from COVID, people want to work remotely. Now the focus is leaning toward profitability. So we're picking up on that and going to offer our May program, Driving Profitability, the Leadership Imperative.
John,
we hope to take
John, I just want to give a personal mention about this program. I mean, this is the real premier place, managing partner to managing partner. I mean, there's just nothing like this. You want to focus on your firm, go out of your firm, go out of the confines of your office, go hang out with, I don't know, 90, 100 other managing partners. It's the premier place to do it. It's just such an open, great feel. David, you were at one.
Yeah, I think it's terrific. You're right, Uri. It's one of the only venue I'm aware of where you can really bounce ideas off of similarly situated partners that are running like firms across the country. And one of the takeaways for me has always been, I've gone, I think, to 4 of the retreats, and each time you leave with at a minimum, a handful of very readily implementable changes, processes that really make a difference. It's been interesting to hear what my colleagues at other firms have been doing.
Well, David, we're glad you're coming and hope to see you this year in Atlanta. Sharon, you've been on our faculty for many, many years, I think from day one, and got a conflict this year, unfortunately, but I know you've been a great supporter of the program too. So check it out, folks. Early registration's open till the 8th of March. And we offer a pretty substantial discount. And then Sharon's got a program coming up that's right on with our topic today, which is creating that ownership mindset. Sharon, tell us about what you got coming up in Chicago.
Thank you so much, John. Yes, just really briefly, this is for the people that you've just made partner or you're considering making partner in the next year or two. And it's really soup to nuts. It's a 2-day, very intensive workshop. I'm going to tell them everything they need to know to be a successful partner in your firm.
Thank you, Sharon. We look forward to it. I'll be on the faculty talking about law firm economics because that's something you need to work with your young lawyers, help them appreciate our profit drivers and a little bit about law firm economics 101. They don't offer that in law school. But if you want to be an owner of a business, you should know how the business makes money or how it loses money. And so, really tuning into your young lawyers so they do become good, responsible stewards of the enterprise. So thank you, Sharon. Today's topic, creating ownership mindset. 75 of you signed up. We'll be sharing data. Importantly, we do want your feedback. So when we hang up, you'll be directed to a very brief survey, 4 questions. What'd you like best? What'd you like least? Topics for the future. Please give us your feedback. We do polling questions. This is our first one, and it's one we ask every time, mostly for David and Sharon to give them a sense of the firm sizes represented on today's call. So if you would, take out your voting device, vote early, vote only once. Elections opened in Georgia, by the way, yesterday, interestingly. So we know how to do some vote counting. And everybody, here's our firm sizes today. We are squarely set on mid-law. And as David says, we try to really be helpful to leaders of smaller, mid-sized law firms because leadership is
John,
really important.
Can you share it?
Share? Yeah, there we go. So firm size is represented here today. Take it in. A few more than 100, a few less than 10, but we're sitting in our sweet spot, about 25 to 100 lawyer firms. So off we go. And when we registered, we asked you a handful of questions. I'm going to invite our guest speakers to comment a little bit about what we're seeing here. The first question asked about the clarity to become a partner at your law firm. How clear is that path? We gave you 4 options. Here's what you said. Sharon, comment to this. Are you surprised?
No, I'm not surprised that 70% of the people responded that it's not really crystal clear. And this is fascinating because the young people want to know what the path is. More now than ever before, they want to be told, if I do A, B, C, and D, then I will be made partner. That's the way the young people nowadays are progressing in their careers. And if they don't get that, they leave and go somewhere else. So it's really important for a firm to communicate what's expected and what the path is.
We continue to get some background noise in there, folks. So if you could take a look at your mic settings, if there's anything we could do, it's definitely there. David, are you surprised when you look at these survey results?
I think I'm pleasantly surprised that as many as 29% of respondents feel as if it's crystal clear what the approach is. My experience has been very similar to what Sharon referenced, which is in particular the younger lawyers. It's almost like they want a set of boxes that they can tick off on the way to different promotions. They want definite clarity as to what exactly do I need to do in order to take the next step in my career. I also think it would be interesting to know who responded to the question. And what I mean by that is, if, for instance, you presented this question to my firm, the older lawyers, those folks that have been equity partners for a very long time, I am near certain would be much more likely to say that the path was crystal clear. And I think as you sort of went down the ladder, so to speak, the younger lawyers less and less so.
You know, David, spot on. We will ask this question at firm retreats frequently, and the partners have a very different answer in many, many law firms than do the junior partners, the income partners, and the associates. The partners think they're being very clear, but for some reason, it's not getting through to the associates. And we'll talk about ways to bring on clarity. They do want, you know, they want to know where the goal line is. They want mileposts. They want to know how they're doing. That feedback, really, really important.
John, one of the pieces that's always forgotten with the young people that want the ABC, the checklist, is that they have to be well liked. That when the partners sit down to vote in who they want to be their partner, it's not just that you do everything that you're supposed to do, but that we like you enough, that we want to share with you. And I think a lot of people think, oh, I did A, B, C, D, they have to make me a partner, but they don't play nice in the sandbox, and they don't do any of the things that they're supposed to do to feel part of a partnership. And that's a piece that's missing sometimes.
Likability. The path, the clarity. I looked for a foggy path here, Sharon. What are some, David, why don't you talk to us about what you think, how it should be clearly articulated to a first, second, third year associate, and then on up the ladder?
And we don't hear David.
We are having sound problems. Looks like Uri is off mic. David, are you there? I show him on mic, but we're not hearing you, David. Let's move on to our next registrant question. And we've been asking this question for 30 years, and that speaks to whether or not your firm has a multi-tiered partnership structure. Yes, no, or we're looking at it. Sharon, what are the advantages of going to a multi-tiered partnership structure? Why are we seeing most smaller and mid-sized firms moving to this model?
It's motivation. It's motivation for the associates to be able to move up to an income partner class or whatever the firm chooses to call that group of attorneys that they can put out in front of potential clients, current clients that they are now in the partnership, even though it's not at the equity level. It's motivating to clients to want to work with those individuals, and it's motivating to the individual to get that title change. And so it shows that the firm is investing in them by giving them that title. Sometimes the problem is, though, we put people up into those levels that aren't really ready for it. And that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, we've seen right at 70-75% every time we ask this question. And I think it's where you park your folks that don't have what it takes to become an owner. They don't have that owner's mindset. Good technicians, good lawyers, but they don't bring it all in as an owner should. What things do you think an owner should be contributing on a regular basis, David Lackowitz? And we're not hearing you, David. I show your mic on our side of things, but we're not hearing you. Sharon, what do you think should I'll ask that question of you.
Yes. All right. So ownership mentality, I think really just defining what that means is the first step that a law firm needs to do, because every law firm has its own culture. And so they have to, oh, I think David left. He's probably going to try to come back in. But you need to know what it means for your firm, what the ownership mentality is. And if you want to get down to specifics, I think I'd like to wait for David to maybe come back on, because he can really give it from his firm's point of view. But I think we'll talk about it a little bit later through some of the other questions as well, John.
I have a question actually for John, because John, you see in counsel firms on running and futuring the firm, right? If that's a word, is planning for the future, John, from that perspective. Is this good to have two-tiered? And how important is it to empower people to become partners, either at the income or at the equity partner? John, Sharon?
I think it's the right way to go. I'm all about a two-tiered partnership structure. To be an owner of a law firm, I think that's a high bar to become an owner of the business. And you're bringing in business. You've got the book. You're in leadership. You're a good mentor. You really care about the place and its long-term success. And I find that a lot of younger lawyers just aren't up for that deal. And they're very content with the non-equity track, the income track. And Sharon, you and I talk about that getting the non-equity, non-lawyer, billable, kind of getting those words out of our firm vocabulary, the non. And,
I think part of the problem, and if we can go back 10 years, we tried to say that the income partner was on a path to equity partner, and we didn't want people to get stuck in that. And so people were being promoted out of it just because of tenure, because of the time that they've had. The problem with the income partner is if we let it be a place where people just sit, then they become complacent and they don't produce at the level that they need to continue to produce. Now, some people, though, love it. They don't have the pressure of the leadership. They don't have pressure of the billable time. They become service partners and they crank out hours. And so a law firm needs to decide if that is beneficial to them, then that's okay if it works within their structure. So we're not saying a two-tier is good or bad, but it really is a pathway so that people feel promoted, they feel they're headed, and they don't just wait 8 years to find out or 10 years to find out whether or not they're going to be a partner. They become income partner. They know they're on the path, typically.
David, your comments.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes. Although we're getting that background again.
Turn off the mic on the computer, maybe.
Yeah. All right. How's this?
Better.
Okay. I apologize for all the tech issues. I've only been doing this regularly for the last 4 years. What I was saying before is I remember when I joined my firm, within a couple of months of joining, I was told by a senior equity partner that to make equity, you need to generate a certain number of dollars in originations for consecutive years. And it kind of sort of turned out not to be the case, that it's a lot more fluid. And I think part of it ties into what Sharon said. It's not only about revenue generated, be it originations or billables, but it's also about how and where you fit into the larger context of the firm. Do you have a niche project? Do you play well in the sandbox? Do you have what our managing partner would call good corporate hygiene? Is this someone who's regularly getting time in, getting bills out, et cetera? So I think the other thing I would note is I think it's changed a lot, at least in my experience over the past 15 years in terms of what we're looking for in equity partners. I think it did used to be very strictly pegged to really originations, and now it's much more fluid and there are other things that factor into that. Just to address the more recent question about the different tiers, we've always had multiple tiers. It became, frankly, a little bit unwieldy. As many of you know, within the last 6 months, we hired a CEO. And one of the first things that she's undertaking is to sort of streamline and make more clear what the promotion path looks like, and also to eliminate some of these different titles that have always seemed unnecessary to me.
Should origination, David, be among the criteria to become an owner of a law firm?
I believe so. Yeah.
And do you have to go self-originate your book of business, or can you take a handoff from a kind senior partner or a retiring senior partner?
Either, obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously. I think there's probably greater value placed on someone who has their own homegrown book, because not so much in terms of what the dollars translate to. In other words, if partner A generates $1 million of his own originations and partner B has a handoff that's worth $1 million, it still translates largely into the same impact on the firm's bottom line. I think the difference is the lawyer who's originating it on her own or on his own is demonstrating an ability to do so. And the hope and expectation is that, whereas I think in the past it was sort of like reaching the brass ring, and maybe people were in a position to sort of relax a little bit. Now I think the difference is it's just another stage in your career, and knowing that the person has demonstrated an ability to generate business, I think tends to indicate what their productivity in terms of originations is going to be going forward. And I think that's very helpful.
And I want to jump on what David said for women, and John is going to do a women's program, and the women's program is always wonderful. Women and diverse attorneys, it's got to be they built their book of business. If it's a handoff, they just will always be climbing. It's respect. You will get more respect, and we've had women managing partners talk about before they became managing partners, they had to show their commitment to the firm by creating their own books.
This question, Sharon, you asked us to include at point of registration, which is written criteria to become a firm owner. Does your firm have its criteria in writing? And surprised by this, Sharon, or what do you think?
Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised to see that, 40% say they do, another 22 say they have them. They don't talk about it that much. So more than half say they have them written down, which is fantastic, because 10 years ago, firms didn't have it written down. So this is a move in the right direction.
When everyone has said to this point, the young lawyers want that roadmap. They want to know what it takes and how they're doing, and they want that feedback.
John?
Yep.
John, I have a contrarian, and I didn't get this comment in earlier when we were talking about, is it as clear? And if you just go back for a second, John, is it clear? We saw vast majority, it's not clear. Is it written? 60% say it's written, but we don't share it. I mean, as a business, and yes, this is better than it's been historically, as a business, if we really do want to train our folks, and if you ask everyone to a T, everyone will say this is our goal for everybody to be an excellent equity partner. To keep that a secret,
yeah,
is
why
terrible.
The secrecy?
I mean, this is absolutely. Now, I think David and Sharon both made the point already that today's generation even wants it more. But forget today's generation. As a business, if you're trying to raise your people to do a certain thing, to not tell them, that's absurd. So I do see this where really the differences are made is when people are trying to attract laterals. The firms that I speak to that are the most successful, not coincidentally, they're also the most transparent on what being an equity partner means. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that means that's the excitement. That's where the excitement is. That's the energy. And that gives the impression, and I think it's true in most cases, that you're a well-managed firm. Because if this is really the goal of all your attorneys, of course you'd be publicizing it. And by the way, we didn't ask the question, John, but you're hopefully telling that to recruiters, and maybe even telling people when they're interviewing. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
I couldn't agree more. But it's amazing how often it's shrouded in this secrecy and ambiguity. David, you wanted in?
You took the words right out of my mouth, John. I was going to say, I never understood that mentality. It seems to me if you're going to ask your partners to be good team players, to lead by example, to satisfy their obligations as partners, you can't then, on the other hand, shroud things in secrecy. I just think you're sort of setting people up to fail. I remember years ago, I proposed sharing, and this is a little bit off topic, but sharing invoices with associates, because we had an associate who was starting to get a reputation of spending too much time on matters. And my view was, let this person see what their time translates to in terms of dollars, so that on the back end they could see that I'm a litigator, when they drafted their summary judgment motion and it ended up being $100,000 motion, they'll have a better sense of sort of their place, not only in terms of how their work translates to dollars, but within the firm. And one of the very senior partners at the time said, "That's crazy. We would never do that. Why would we ever show the associates invoices?" And it just always sort of stuck with me, that I think, sort of in all respects, the more transparent you can be, the better that you can communicate your expectations, and whether people are hitting those expectations or not, I think the better served everybody will be.
Well, and this is the reason why this happens, in my opinion, in my lowly opinion, is that most of the people who run law firms never took a business course in their life.
Correct.
They're poli-sci majors and English majors and all of that. And so they don't understand the philosophy of how you run an effective business. It's the practice of law. Well, nope, it's not. It's the business of law. You practice within the business of law. And I think that's why they don't understand. You can go into a corporate environment, just pick a car manufacturer. The people who work on the line that are putting the widgets in and all that, they know what it costs to put those widgets in. And if they don't do it correctly, what the failure of that's going to be for the price of trying to sell a car. This is all communicated up and down in the business world. And in law, it's so shrouded with the secrecy, the mystery of it, the secret handshake, all of that. But in the 30 years I've been in law, and I'm sure all of you, we've seen the pendulum move. And it's because the younger people are demanding it more. And law only moves forward, look at COVID, because something pushes them. Lawyers move forward because something else, and it's usually clients, or in that case, the COVID, technology, all that stuff, that lawyers have to be forced to change behaviors. Unfortunately, it's a very general statement because not all lawyers fit that, but primarily. I remember when computers came out and I was working in a law firm, in the firm, and the lawyer, I don't want one of those on my desk. Seriously, I don't want one of those on my desk.
One of the books I often recommend to firm leaders, Leading Change by John Cotter. And he talks about, we don't change until we hurt.
Yeah.
And lawyers have been pretty comfortable over the years and haven't really felt the pain. But boy, I think with this artificial intelligence coming on, multidisciplinary practices starting to creep in. Utah and Arizona, we've been talking about that for a long, long time. Stuff's happening, and getting ahead of your competition and investing in your people, really, really important. Let me move on because we have so much to cover here, and want to get a few polling questions. And that segues into our very next polling question. And I think this is an interesting one. And that is, bear with me, what percentage of your partners do you believe bring an ownership mentality to the firm?
And demonstrate it regularly.
And Sharon, I'm going to ask you to predict what you think this crowd is going to say in terms of the ownership mindsets within their law firms. What do you think we're going to see here?
I think they're going to say 25 to 49%, but the managing partners sometimes feel like it's less than 25 because what I hear is my partners don't step up. My partners don't do it. They don't help. I'm on a ship by myself.
Yeah. David, what do you think we're going to see here as I reveal the answer to this question?
Yeah, I would have also said 25 to 49, but I think my answer is skewed in part by I'm assuming that there are a significant percentage of the people that are joining us today because they're having some issues. So
That could be. That could be. But here's what we see as I share these results. Sharon, I've been with
Mm-hmm.
you. I've had more managing partners say, I wish more of my partners would give a, begins with S.
Right.
I wish more of my partners gave an S about the firm and its future and its people and its clients. Whoa, what do you do with that? How do you make people want to care? How do you make people want to bring on ownership mindsets?
I think we've hit on a lot of the different answers to this question. I think it starts with expectations. What are we expecting of people when they become partners? I think something Sharon said earlier really resonated, and I know I said this before, but about playing well in the sandbox. If we all have these partners that can just be very, very difficult. They can be hard on associates, or maybe they refuse to get their time in or get their bills off, or clients who don't pay. If we think that promoting these people to equity partners and suddenly their behavior is going to change, I think we're a little bit delusional. I think the program that Sharon's running, that Young Accelerator program, firms could really benefit from that, because I know, like, from my own personal experience, it's just sort of like one day you wake up and they say, oh, you're going to be a partner. And then subsequent to that, I was told, okay, you're going to run this department. You're going to help manage the firm. But there was never any systematic training. Nobody sat me down and said, this is what's expected of partners. This is the right way to manage. I mentioned to Sharon the other day, I was talking with a lawyer friend of mine who manages a very large firm in Europe. And apparently this is fairly commonplace outside of the States, a prerequisite to serving in a managerial capacity, be it a department head serving on management, is taking a course on management, which I think we probably all benefit from.
I think David's last point is the key. Yes, everybody has some strong personalities, but David's last point I want to reiterate, which is we've allowed this to exist for so long so that we're stuck with this situation. We're talking, and I know we're going to get to some tips on how to manage that and how to change that. But the biggest problem is that we've tolerated it for so many years. In fact, today's problem partners probably will reminisce about what? The previous generation's problem partners, so much so. So they were raised in a firm that tolerated it. They grew up in a firm that tolerated it. So even if now there's this shift to ownership mentality and what's right and what's wrong, and now we're going to say the rules of the games, we still already have, these old folks, I'll call them old because we're referring to them, have done it for many years, who have experienced this and have acted this way. So we can train, but we're only training from here and on.
But I think more than any other profession, law is steeped in a reverence for seniority. Seniority, our elders. And crossing the elders is something we don't do. And I think most other businesses look at performance over seniority. And so just because you've been around a while doesn't make you an owner.
All right, but I want to paint a picture for everybody. All right, because to create seniority doesn't create the ownership mentality. We agree with that. But if you close your eyes and you think of the old-fashioned general merchandise store, in North Carolina or whatever, and there's the father standing there with his arm around the son and saying, one day this will be yours. And then that young man, and could be daughter, all right, started sweeping the floors when they were 8 years old. Child labor laws, and then did the boxes, and then, continued to move up. And then one day the father says, I'm retiring, here's the key to this front door. What happens in law now, which used to happen, 30 years ago, is that those senior partners did take a junior partner under their wing and show them the ropes and say, one day this is going to be yours. Well, you can't do that when you've got 5 partners, when you've got 20, when you've got 100, you've got 300 partners. the firms aren't doing that. They're not succession planning, picking who are the potential leaders out there, taking them under the wing and feeding them the Kool-Aid so that they become an owner, that they create the ownership mentality. It's the way firms are working now so fast. It just, turn it around, texting our clients now. I mean, remember, it was faxes, right? And that was outrageous. And before that, it was letters in the mail and couriers. Everything is just so fast. There isn't the time to mentor people to create that ownership mentality. And I think that is a significant piece that's missing.
Well, we can try to bring on ownership mindset among the up and comers. What about the people who are already partners of the firm, who aren't producing? Sharon, you and I have talked a lot about chronic underperformance, disruptive behavior, and we got to look at votes to expel, things like this, to weed out underperformers and bad actors. Yeah.
So yes, I love talking about underperformers. I think there's some articles that you're going to share with the audience that I've written on this, but I want to take the underperformer away from the ownership mentality. The thing, because I see them as separate things. The lack of ownership mentality means that the firms are not spending enough time sharing, back to what we talked about before, data and information, being transparent with the partners and letting the partners see, when you do this, this is the consequence down the line. This is how it affects. If you don't put your time in, and we send a bill out to a client, and then next month that bill is triple because you didn't put your time in for the month before, what does that do to the client relationship? There's not enough cause and effect. And so when you're taught these things, shared this information, and not everybody will wake up and realize it, but the ownership mentality comes when I understand that when I walk by the trash that's on the floor and ignore it as a owner, then I have abdicated my responsibility for this firm. But if I go and make the phone call to whoever cleans up the trash and says, could you go clean it up? Then I'm taking ownership of the firm. Better yet, let's pick it up ourselves and throw it away.
Yeah, why don't you bend over and pick up the gum wrapper? You can do that. David?
No, I was just going to say to your point, John, about the underperformers. I do think that that's a tough one. It's something that all firms struggle with, and it's a balancing act. And what I mean by that is, so my firm's around 90 lawyers, and we compete with talent with big law. And one of the ways that we do so is because, I wouldn't consider everybody in my firm to be grinders. We're not expecting the young lawyers to bill 2,000 hours a year, for instance. And so with that in mind, I think it's challenging to say to an equity partner who's had a run of very successful years, you had a bad year, you're out. And so, you're trying to balance, on the one hand, making sure that people satisfy their obligations, which again gets back to communication and transparency, but also with holding people's feet to the fire. I know by us, it's only every 3 years that we revisit our equity structure, so that if somebody who historically has a track record of performing, but then underperforms 1 year, they're not going to be dinged for it, so to speak. But it's a significant, it's a period of time that's enough to judge whether or not someone's productivity is really slipping, and if so, whether a reduction in their percentage interest warrants revisiting.
The underperformance, if a managing partner allows underperformance to happen in their firm, it creates the other partners, it affects their morale, and they hold the managing partner accountable. What's wrong with you? Why can't you do this? And so they lose respect for the managing partner. But, and John knows this, I've worked with a lot of underperformers and bad behaviors. They're two different things. They really are two different things. But an underperformer is underperforming for a reason. And to David, to your point, right? They're underperforming. They had a bad year. Well, what happened that year? Could have been a family issue. Could have been a personal illness issue. Could be that their they're in real estate, and real estate tanked that year. You know, it could be a performance issue because you change technology and they don't know how to use the new technology. There's always a reason why somebody's underperforming. And what happens is that law firms are very punitive. We're going to take money away from you. We're going to de-equitize you. We're going to punish, 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 punish. And they don't take the time to figure out what's wrong. And if you can figure out what's wrong, sometimes you can fix it. And if you fix that partner, then they will become even more loyal and work even harder, hopefully. You know, I'm not Pollyannic here. You can't fix everybody, but sometimes you can fix a person once you figure out what it is. I'll give you just a very quick story. I worked with a partner, you know, underperforming, went through secretaries like crazy. Why? You know what it was? It was the technology. 2 technology things had changed in the firm. The document management system and the billing system. And this partner, who was in his mid 60s, just couldn't keep up. So he kept yelling at the assistant, kept yelling, and the assistants would quit. When I figured out what was wrong, then we got the guy, a person to sit with him and hold his hand and show him how to do it and show him how to do the technology and all that. And we fixed the problem. He was too embarrassed to say what was wrong, or didn't even know that that's what was so irritating to him. There's always a reason for underperformance. You just got to get behind it.
John, before we address one thing Sharon said, which really to me falls under the bucket of leading by example. Our younger lawyers know what's going on, regardless of whether or not you're in a firm that's very transparent or less transparent. They know who's pulling their weight. They know who's getting their time in. They know who's billing what hours. And if you've got senior people that are just checked out, it's very difficult to then say to these same lawyers, don't worry about what these other more established lawyers are doing. This is what's expected of you. It's become an issue with us with return to the office because, frankly, a lot of the older, more established partners are just not interested in coming back with any great regularity. And so it's very difficult. It's been difficult to enforce our return to work policy because some of these younger lawyers will say, but such and such isn't coming in and they're a big muckety muck. Why should I be expected to come in? So it's a longish winded way of saying I think leading by example is critical.
Now, one more thing on under. All right, go ahead, and then we'll. I want to say one more thing about it, then we'll move on. But you go first.
I was just going to say, Sharon and David both said it's that the underperformers really affect your firm on the way it reflects on you, and there are all these different permeations, but they know who the underperformers are. They know, in fact, often what they're doing that's underperforming. And if you don't do something about it, and we can debate what that something could be, and there's a lot of different ways and different circumstances, but the point is, it says more about you than it does about them. The fact that not everybody does everything right, all right, there's nothing new about that. But the fact that some firms tolerate more than others, very, very bad for the way the others will look at you as management.
Yep.
You know, we've had Larry Richard on our faculty for many, many years, the psychologist, the herding cats guy out of Pennsylvania. And Larry talks about the impact that chronic underperformance, compensation will take care of it. They're not doing any harm. We'll take care of it at compensation. And he says that doesn't go far enough. They are a true drag on the efficiency and productivity of your organization. Worse is the just disruptive behavior. They could be a great performer, but God, they just can't get along with anybody, and they're really causing problems on the agenda of the management committee every damn month. I think this is leadership, and what are you willing to tolerate? What are you? How bad does it have to get before we take action? And it shouldn't have to get bad. And I go back to that partnership agreement and votes to expel. I think that can keep people on their toes. It's these agreements where unanimous vote to kick somebody out. You're there for life. So I might give yourself a little leverage and adjust your partnership agreement. Sharon, what do you see in votes to expel equity partners generally in the partnership agreements you read?
It's not in there. because they want it to be, love, love, love everybody. But I think that when you've addressed an underperformer or bad behavior, and pick a number, 3 times, half a dozen times, 1 year's worth, 4 years worth, at some point, you got to put it in writing with the individual, with the management committee, that if this person's behavior doesn't improve, and by this X date, we are going to take action, so that everybody is understanding that this person's being terminated for a cause, because it's affecting the bottom line. If they were embezzling money, you'd fire them on the spot. So they're losing the firm money in the exact same way because they're not doing what they need to do. But it's hard. And I don't think, again, law firm partnership agreements, and lawyers write agreements all the time for businesses, but they don't follow what they tell the businesses to do. So it's kind of crazy.
See, generally, I think, a high bar to admit a new owner, and a relatively low bar to kick them out if they're becoming problematic, and you have the votes to do it. I think so often we know the problem, we just can't muster the votes to deal with it. I find a lot of managing partners want to be liked, and I think a lot of partnerships intentionally elect weak leadership so I can do what I want, and I have all the autonomy in the world, and no one's going to bother me. David, you wanted to say something?
Well, just when you say high bar to get in, I think that's exactly right. And I think if that bar was set high enough and with total transparency so that people knew what was going to be expected of them going forward, other than the occasional rogue, maybe bad apple, you're really going to avoid a lot of what we're talking about. I think the problem often is, oh, lawyer's a nice person. He or she has been with us for a number of years, pretty good lawyer. Let's promote him, without giving thought to some of these other things that we're talking about now. And then you find yourself with a partner who's not performing.
Well, then I get into some smaller towns, dominant law firms in smaller towns where everybody knows everybody, and there's nepotism, and we're not running the place like a business. We're running the place like a country club, and everybody's concerned about the feelings, hurt feelings if we're too hard-nosed, too deliberate.
But it starts, and it's funny, it doesn't, not in the small law firms, but it starts in the larger law firms from summer programs. Law firms, if they don't give offers to the summer associates, they're already on the X list, and nobody wants to go work there for the summer. So this have to be nice to everybody starts so early. And I like what you said, like it's a country club rather than a business. And in the business world, you would never hire somebody to be an owner. You would never go into the cupcake baking business with somebody that you didn't think was going to come in at 4 a.m. start the cupcake. Right? You wouldn't do it.
Sharon, you're so big on training young lawyers, the business side, the business development, the leadership, all these competencies that we look for in owners. And so we have a question here, and this is a click all that apply question. So in which areas does your firm provide leadership training from the list below? Timekeeping and billing practices? Is it leadership? Is it business development, law firm economics, regular performance reviews? I'm not getting any votes here, folks.
They don't do any training. Oh my God.
Well, they're coming in. They're just slow here. But here they're starting to float in. This is a click all that apply. So if you're doing the business development and the leadership and giving them, quarterly performance reviews, you're going to check 3 of those boxes. So where are you providing the training for your lawyers? And Sharon, from our list, people are still voting. Again, this is a click all that apply. And for some reason, our votes aren't coming out the way they should. We're having technology issues, but there's what we get in terms of our in terms of our response to this question?
Oh, this is exactly what I was going to say. Everybody teaches how to keep time because that's the
We live on
lifeline.
the billable hour. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad.
John, people are writing in. I'm sorry to interrupt. People are writing in. They could only choose one. So I think probably that's just
All
a
right.
technology issue.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Okay. That explains it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's still good to see that the majority of the people are doing the timekeeping and billing. I think that's important, and that business development is on the list. You know, and I'm sure everybody does some level of business development. But I put these out here because this is exactly every firm should be doing all 5 of these topics. Period. Full stop.
Yep. No
That's
doubt.
why they're there.
Hey, David, when you were coming up the ranks, did you get much training in these areas?
No, similar to the polling results, obviously, uh, all things concerning getting bills prepared and out. But that was basically it. In fact, I distinctly remember being told in response to a question I presented to a senior lawyer many years ago at a different firm regarding business development. And the response was effectively, look, you're here to churn out the work we give you. You are not here to try to generate work. And that always stuck with me because I think, it's not always so easy to bring in laterals with significant practices. You're asking people from outside your community to mesh. That's not always going to happen. People's practices don't always produce as advertised. I have found your best bet is working internally with the younger lawyers on a lot of these things. And I think one of the things we have done pretty well at my firm is on the business development front and sitting down with, yeah, I see the slide, and, sitting down with the younger lawyers, even first years, and just getting them of the mindset that there is a business to the practice of law. I mean, we've spoken before about I'm unaware of any law schools that teach a course, that offer a course in the business of law. And, I always like to say internally, you can be Clarence Darrow, but if you don't have client service, skills are going to be wasted. And we all know the business development piece, which is really what I'm harping on, it's a very long road. It takes many, many years to develop a practice. And the sooner you start just discussing it with the younger lawyers, the sooner they'll start generating their own work, and it sort of snowballs. And so I think we're all remiss if we're not spending considerable time, not only on some of these other things, including how to manage and lead, but in particular on the business development piece.
Yeah, training and development. They don't learn these skill sets in law school generally, although we're starting to see a little bit of it in some curricula. Sharon, you do some work at the university level with a number of universities, I know. You seeing more
Yeah.
business
Yeah.
of law being taught?
Exactly, business of law. And I think David is interested in doing a business of law for his alma mater. So, kudos to you, David, to bring that forward. Yes, I do think more law schools are touching on it. They'll give a seminar on it. I tend to do the one-off seminars at the law schools, not a 15-week curriculum-based program. But the law schools are realizing that the younger attorneys want this because, and I do not know the statistics right now, there's a greater number of lawyers who graduate law school and hang out their own shingle with no experience, especially if they're first gen and a small community in the middle of nowhere that we've ever heard of. They go back and become the lawyer to their community, to the place that they grew up, and don't know what they're doing at all. But the more that they're trained in school on how to run a business, then the better they'll be successful and all of that. But, leadership had a 0, and it meant nobody even accidentally.
Well, this question, I didn't set it right. I meant to set it up as a click all that apply, but it got in there as a pick one.
Correct.
So my screw up on that one.
No. But the interesting thing is the other one still had clicks. So somebody picked those as their first decision, and nobody picked leadership as their first decision. And this is part of the ownership mentality, is that when you acquire the leadership decisions, you talked about leading change, being a change management person within your firm is a leadership skill. It's an owner's skill. When you own anything. You own your home. You take responsibility for your home to keep it maintained, right? And so if you are the owner of your business, you take responsibility for keeping it maintained by getting rid of the attorneys that are dragging you down, by hiring the laterals that are bringing nice little books with them, by training and developing everybody in between. That's an ownership mentality. So the leadership stuff, and it's not that you have to bring leadership training into your firm. We already discussed this. They could go out. They could go out. You know, if you want to spend $35,000, go to Harvard and do it at Harvard. Good for
Well,
you.
and Sharon, we were just at the Virginia Bar's annual conference, and they're setting up a leadership academy within their young lawyers division. And, you know, FDCC has a similar program for young lawyers, Federation of Defense and Corporate Counsel. So we're starting to see some of the voluntary bars
Yep.
set up leadership academies for young lawyers, and they really seem to eat it up, the young
Yeah,
lawyers.
they want it.
They
But
respond
even
well.
local universities have a 4-day leadership course, nothing to do with law, but just straight up leadership or management skills. I mean, invest in your people. And if you've made somebody a partner, please invest in them from the beginning of they give you a check if you ask for a check. And you give them the keys to the washroom and send them off to a program. And I think
We had, who you hire, hiring people with leadership skill sets. Look at the resumes for the class president, the captain of the football team. We were talking about this at last year's conference in Atlanta, and this one managing partner from a Canadian firm talks about how we at our firm don't hire anybody, lawyer or support staff, if they have not at one point in their lives worked for tips.
That's
Interesting. People who've had to work and hustle and I thought that was a really interesting point. And she says we don't
John,
make any exceptions to that rule.
John, I think it's a bit of what we were saying before, which is these are the 5 things that we want really in our future leaders, we say, and yet we don't train for it at all. It's kind of shocking. I also think it goes into the hiring. Like David said, when he was a young lawyer, a baby lawyer, they said, Bill, Bill, Bill. And that's all
Right.
they hired him for. So
Right.
guess what? Your partners, maybe they know how to bill. What about all the other stuff?
Yep.
Well, and then you're on the cusp of becoming an equity partner, and they say, "Where's your book of business?"
right.
You say, "Why? What are you talking about? You told me to bill 2,000 hours for the past 8 years, and I gave you that and more." And
Right.
now you kind of switch the game on me here. And I used to call that the mushroom theory of associate development. You keep them in the dark and feed them crap, and some of them will turn out okay. But these kids have questions. I
Right.
hear that from a lot of managing partners, Sharon. I'll bet you do too. These young lawyers are asking questions that
Yes.
I never would have thought to ask when I
Correct.
was a young lawyer at their stage of career. So
David?
it's a new day, and these young lawyers want the
Right.
investment.
Right.
And I just getting back to the last question, John. All of those things are opportunities to be a good, effective leader. And what I mean by that is, if you have a robust business development plan, for instance, if you have a robust leadership training plan, maybe in the very short time it takes a little bit of your time to put that together, but over time, you're training your younger lawyers how to generate business. And there's nothing more rewarding than bringing in your own matters and working on your own matters. You're going to make yourself self sufficient, a more well rounded attorney. Same with the leadership thing. And, I hate to use cliches, but all of these, it does truly rise the boat for everybody in the sense that if you're training your younger lawyers to generate business as an equity partner, you're not expecting them to generate business. So every dollar that they're generating on their originations is just going to your bottom line. If you're doing a really good job training your up and coming stars how to be great leaders, it's going to make it a lot easier when it's time for you to transition out of a management capacity, because now you've got a roster of younger people that you're going to feel comfortable handing the baton off to. So all of these things, I think, go to serve not only the younger lawyers, but also the equity partnership writ large.
Sharon, we got a polling question out there. What do you think?
Oh, I think that they're going to do gentle prodding to improve, tied with ignoring it and hoping it goes away.
That strategy always works, right?
Yeah.
If we ignore it long enough, it'll go away.
Exactly.
David, what do you think? Most firms approaching the underperformer.
I'd say I agree with Sharon. I'd say most either ignore it or light touch.
Ah,
14% say they're dealing
wow.
with it. That's good. I think you're running a business and there should be accountability for performance and behavior. So let me move on from that one. Uri, you surprised to see that result to our polling
No,
question?
no, and of course the statistics nobody talks about is we do not have any underperformers is 0.
Right. Exactly.
They are
Uh,
living in
so we kind of beat the chronic underperformer to death here. I like these pictures. Don't sue me on the age thing, but yeah, when it's you deal with it or you don't, and it does have an impact on your culture and overall productivity.
81% said that they gently prod, but what we
Yes.
don't have is how many years have you been gently prodding and really turn to ignore it and hope it corrects itself. So that's what's really missing there.
This
Who's the
isn't fun
underperformer?
stuff. This is leadership. And what are you willing to tolerate?
Who's
David,
the
you
underperformer in your slide? Is it the guy who's relaxing on the beach or the folks who went for the casual bike ride?
well, one is the young lawyer who's kind of checked out on you during COVID, perhaps, and the other is the senior lawyer who's retired but has not yet made a formal announcement. But it's become clear that you've retired, and so maybe it's time to, move to counsel or something. But yeah, I love going to iStock Photo and plucking these pictures out of there, and I try to get a
John,
little
you have the poll up.
creative and
poll still.
thought-provoking when we put them. So there's our chronic underperformers, and leadership is not easy. Leadership is not easy. You have to make tough decisions from time to time if your firm's going to grow and prosper. And here we are jumping from the nice, comfortable but crowded bowl to bigger seas, and it can be scary. But leadership, I think, is really, really critical in this day and time in our profession. Uri, what say you about leadership, business development, all this good stuff we've been talking about?
This is the hardest part. This is the hardest part of running a business with personalities that you hope to grow from out of law school until retirement. This is the toughest part. But it doesn't get easier when you ignore it. Sometimes people are, oh, we'll deal with it next year. When people are older and older, it's not easier. And it doesn't go away, as several of you have pointed out. So this is the tough stuff, but it's got to be done.
Reminds me of one of my favorite, Barney Fife, and guiding Andy how to raise Opie. And Opie was showing some delinquent tendencies. And Barney said, nip it, Andy, nip it in the bud when you first see it before it gets out of control and then becomes a difficult situation. But calling it out, holding people accountable, important stuff. Here's our reminders. I want to thank our friends at Nine Sale. They've been doing write-ups, recaps of our sessions, and doing a nice job for us. We'll send you the recording. Want your feedback, and come to Atlanta if you are so inclined. You won't regret it. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Uri. Thank you, David, for being with us this afternoon. And we are at the top of the hour and ready to roll. Just round the table quick. Sharon, what's our one most important takeaway from today's conversation?
Take action.
Action. David?
Communication and transparency.
Uri?
I've said enough. John?
I was going to roll with transparency was my big takeaway, and how important it is to put it out there and share with people where we're going, how they're doing. Transparency is a good thing to get that engagement. Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the program, and have a great afternoon. And thank you, Sharon, David, and Uri, for your participation.
Thank you,
Thank
John.
you, John.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
John.
Have a good afternoon.